Hello, everybody, and welcome to 38 Weeks to Go, your weekly podcast about fantasy football. Game week 28 is done, and if we didn't know any better, we would have thought it was game week 29. It has been a low scoring week, a struggle. There are now 9 game weeks left to go. How is everybody feeling about this? My game week 28 was a disaster. Where I've never been so afraid to open my fantasy team like this. I remember at one point looking at my my captain having -3. I almost wanted to faint. The truth of the matter is, it was very difficult to have a great game week planning for the next game week. You know what I mean? And that's why most scores were low across the board. And also, nobody hit. And by nobody, I mean Arsenal didn't have a big score line, and Saka didn't perform. You go to Aston Villa, Watkins didn't perform. You go to Liverpool, nobody performed. You go to Haaland, he didn't perform. Foden didn't perform. It was just a bit of a tough weekend. So, for my team, I brought in Doty, Tavernier, and Morris, losing a -8 to do that. I removed Trippier, Adingra, and Watkins to do this. In that regard, it was fine because Trippier was injured, Adingra didn't perform, and thankfully Watkins didn't perform. So that really helped me. I lost 8 but gained 3 because I got 11 points from those players. So it wasn't a great return, but it was a negative. Or at least that's what I tell myself. I was a bit unlucky with injuries. Edison got injured before playing 60. Gordon got injured before playing 60 as well. So I got a combination of 1 point from Edison and Gordon. Arsenal and Liverpool didn't keep clean sheets, so I didn't get anything from my defenders. Haaland did nothing, Saka did nothing. Tavernier underperformed, Morris was a gamble. Solanke slipped and missed that penalty, so at the end of that first game week, I was having a 25-26 point haul, and I was like, goodness, this is looking like game week 11. So I was holding my breath, waiting for yesterday's game, and I immediately regretted not having Semenyo or Barkley in my team because those were people I had considered. And instead of Barkley, I banked on Bournemouth and went for Tavernier. And then he came on as a sub, so he didn't really participate in this haul, which was so disappointing. But thanks to this game, compared to how the weekend began, it ended much better. From 26-27, I ended up with 49 points. Not a great haul, but I am happy to be there. Just a little sad that Garnacho got 9 points and he was on my bench. When I look at the table, it seems like nobody really believed in this double game week. From number 1 to number 7 about, nobody really made decisions in terms of bringing in Bournemouth or Luton players. From number 8 onwards, you can see that people are trying to make up the gap between them and the people at the top of the table, and they are the ones who are trying to take advantage of this double game week. To be fair to them, it's hard to choose players from these teams, and I chose 3 and I gambled and lost. So it wasn't a bad decision. In this game week, there were only 3 clean sheets. They came in Manu 2-0, Brighton 1-0, and Spurs 4-0. Spurs 4-0 was the biggest surprise of the weekend. Believe me, there were other surprises. For example, Bournemouth 2, Sheffield 2. Another one was West Ham 2, Burnley 2. But 4-0 was unexpected as well as surprising. McGinn got sent off, and once that happened, all chances of a comeback were done. It was 2-0 at the time, and that was that. Son was immense in this game. He had 1 goal and 2 assists. Pedro Porro was back, got a clean sheet. Johnson scored for Spurs along with Maddison and Timo Werner. That's the second game in a row that Timo Werner has scored, just in case you're thinking about which Spurs players to bring on. Son had 2 assists, Kulevski had 1, and Sarr had a really beautiful assist for Maddison's goal. Aston Villa had a few chances here and there. They were the second best in this game. But it was clear that, having played on Thursday, they just seemed like they had nothing in them. They seemed just tired. Like they could not compete in this game. And even if you heard the post-match review, Ange Postecoglou was like, we knew we would be fitter than they would be. And so we used that to our advantage. Europe matters. When making your teams, just look at the fixtures. Those that play in Europe tend to suffer. Son, after his big performance, got 3 bonus points. Romero got 2. Madison and Pedro Porro got 1. I honestly think Romero is just a secret weapon in defense. He just seems to get bonus points no matter what. He's like a defensive Nzogbia. Bournemouth 2, Sheffield 2. Sheffield went 2 goals up very quickly. And this would be a theme of Bournemouth's weekend. They could just not defend. They would just concede. Solanke had a goal disallowed. Then he slipped and missed the penalty. And at this point I was like, goodness, what are the football gods doing? They then came back through Dango and Enes Unal, who had assists from Christie and Dango. And by Dango I just mean Ouattara. Who would have chosen Ouattara? I'm sure none of us. Before this game he had never even scored. And then he has a goal and an assist. Fantasy, I'm telling you. So of course Ouattara had the 3 bonus points, Christie had 2, and Hammer had 1. Burnley West Ham 2-2. Nobody saw that coming. And let me tell you for free, please go and look at Fofana's goal. Where? That was a bullet. No keeper in the world would have saved that. And this is also another reason that our teams didn't do well. A lot of you were banking on a clean sheet from Mr. Ariola, and there was no way he could have kept that out. And then Mavropanos went and scored an own goal, and that was a bit meh. Paqueta, since his comeback, has been great for West Ham, and he was still good in this game. He had a great goal, and Danny Ings had 1 disallowed for very cruel offside. Sometimes I think the spirit of offside should be considered, because that should have been allowed to stay. But then it didn't matter because he then scored again. Fofana got the 3 bonus points, Ings got 2, and Cullen got 1. The marquee game of the weekend was Manchester City versus Liverpool. It ended in a draw, 1-1. Liverpool seemed to want it more, in my view, and I think they did enough to win, but Luis Diaz was the 12th man for Manchester City. He just did not have his shooting boots on that day. Haaland, except for that run with Van Dijk, he was a spectator for the rest of the game. He really was absent. And there's been a theme this season. He has been absent in the biggest games. And that is why I was very happy not to have him as my captain. Even if the double game week hadn't been happening, he wouldn't have been my captain in this game. He's just not the guy from last season. Stones scored off a KDB assist, and then Edison fouled Nunez in the box. McAllister scored the penalty, and then Edison got injured. So he sold his team twice. Painful for me, who had Edison as his keeper. The best match of the weekend was played last night. Bournemouth 4, Luton 3. At halftime, it was 3-0, and I'm just over there thinking now, why did I put Solanke in my team? Why did I believe in Bournemouth? And then 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, 4-3. Goodness, that was a good game. Classic game. Luton may not stay up, but they have been a very fun team to watch. They have been able to score against absolutely anyone. The only problem for people like me who were counting on them to score was that it was hard to choose who would score. In Luton's previous game against Crystal Palace, it was Woodrow who scored. I've never even seen that guy before. The only Woodrow I know is Woodrow Wilson. And they were lucky not to lose that game by 5 or 6 goals. If you just look at the highlights for Crystal Palace, Mateta looked like he could have scored 4 goals by himself. As they could have, like, absolutely, the football gods were with them. There is no other reason to explain why they didn't lose that game. But anyway, it looked like they had learned from that game, came into the Bournemouth game, and they just ripped them apart in the first half. 3 good goals. Chong scored an opener, and I was feeling bad because I was like, I knew I wanted him into my team. It was a great assist by Clark, who scored some really good goals against Manchester City. Ogbene then scored, and then Barkley scored. Doughty, thank goodness, had an assist, and Kabore had an assist. For us who had Morris, not a good day. Second half, I'm not even sure what happened. Solanke scored a really, really good goal. Zabani scored a header which was questionable. It was good, but it wasn't clear at the time. Then Semenyo scored the equalizer, magnificent individual effort, and then the winner, 4-3, and that sealed an amazing comeback for Bournemouth. Semenyo had 3 bonus points. Solanke had 2 bonus points, maybe because he scored a super goal. And Chong had 1 for Luton. And that was so great because he really saved our game week. And by he, I mean Solanke. Solanke was virtually everybody's captain this week. I think over 2 million people globally had captained him. The biggest performer of the game week was Son with 17. Second was Semenyo with 15. Third was Ouattara with 14. Fourth was Palmer with 13. And tied in 5th was Christie from Bournemouth and Unal from Bournemouth. There were 3 clean sheets this weekend. Onana kept one of them, and that made him the top performer. He had 11 points. Verbruggen from Brighton, who kept the clean sheet, was second with 10. And Vicario from Tottenham had 6. In 4th place was Neto, who played twice, and Kaminski, who had 4, who played twice. When it comes to defenders, Ben White had a great weekend, and he was a top performing defender with 11. Stones had 10. Ait Nouri had 10. Ben White had 2 assists. Ait Nouri and Stones scored a goal each. Bogle had 9, and Zabarani, tied with Romero, had 8. In case you were wondering, Bogle is a Sheffield player. Midfield saw the biggest returns as it has been this season. As previously stated, Son is number 1 with 17 points. Ouattara from Bournemouth had 14. Palmer, who continues to be amazing this season, has 13. Christie had 12. Bruno Fernandes, long time since we've heard his name, had 11. And then Iwobi, McAllister, and Chong were tied with 10. Rice was just below them with 9. Tied with Barkley, Garnacho, and Maddison. When it comes to strikers, Semenyo was a top performing striker, especially given last night's performance. He had 15 points. Unal, 12. Fofana with a super goal, 9. Woodrow Wilson had 9. And Solanke and Nicholas Jackson Mateta had 8. Now for some fun stats. Or just stats. Onana has now kept 8 clean sheets, and that keeps him second in terms of clean sheets. He has made the 3rd most saves with 103. Garnacho has now returned 2 goals and 3 assists in the last 6 game weeks. This may not surprise anyone, but Solanke's 0 against Sheffield was the lowest he has ever returned. But it was almost -3, so 0 is not too bad. Sheffield have lost 15 points from winning positions. That's why they're at the bottom. Muniz from Fulham has blanked in his last 2 away matches, while he has returned in all of his last 3 home games. So, what are you thinking? They're playing Spurs at home. Dun dun dun. Arsenal have now won 8 consecutive games. Kai Havertz has scored in 4 consecutive matches. Declan Rice has only blanked once in the last 6 matches. He has scored 3 goals and provided 3 assists. Underrated. Fantasy-wise, they paid a lot for him. They're getting their money's worth. Brennan Johnson has scored 3 goals and provided 2 assists in his last 6 matches. That's a sneaky differential. Watkins has only blanked for the 3rd time in the last 9 game weeks. Reliable. Gross has provided 5 assists in his last 5 starts. for Brighton. And in the game that he didn't assist, he scored a goal. Forest have failed to win in 6 of their last 7 matches. Very poor form. Bowen has failed to score in 9 of the last 10 game weeks. Haaland had 21 touches in that Liverpool game and only 1 touch in the box. Salah, who came on in the 61st minute, made more touches than him. In the last 5 matches, McAllister has scored 2 goals and provided 3 assists. And he is now the official penalty taker when Salah is not on the pitch. Darwin Núñez has been caught offside and has hit the post more times than any player in the Premier League this season. Bournemouth are the 3rd team in Premier League history to come back and win from 3 goals down. And this was the first time in 21 years that this has happened. The other 2 times it happened was Man U against Spurs in 2001 and Wolves versus Leicester in 2003. With the assist that Doughty got last night, it puts him 2nd in assists for defenders. Only Trippier has more than him. Semenyo was triple captained by 1,577 players, and that would be more than the Haaland triple captain haul. In this game week, in 2008, Lampard bagged 28 points in a single game week, which I think is a record, versus Derby. Cole Palmer has now gotten 7 double-digit hauls. Only Salah has more. Salah has 8. Newcastle have conceded 3 or more goals this season 9 times. Only Burnley, Sheffield, and Luton have conceded more. That's how bad their defense has been this season. Ederson is going to be out for a month, so Ortega will be in his place. Ortega is 3.7. Ben White is the highest scoring defender, and he only has 3% ownership. Do with that information what you will. Looking at our table, 15 over 25 people captained Solanke. 1, Mr. Mike Wow, triple captained him, and that helped him get 73 points. In second place for captaincy, it was a tie between Haaland and Saka, with 3. 3 people chose Saka as their captain, and 3 people chose Haaland to be their captain. You know, we talk about taking big swings, but no bigger swing was taken this weekend than one of ours who chose Tavernier as his captain. Painful. 6 points. Painful. Well done, Bonaji. You are a risk taker for sure. The most transferred in player into our game week was a tie between Solanke and Morris, followed by Zabarani, Tavernier, and Doughty. The most players transferred out were Alvarez, Senesi, Haaland, Tony, and Trippier. For those of you who removed Pedro Porro, pole sana. The average game week points were 44 this week. So if you're like me and you got above 44, well done. I got 49. 18 over 25 of us got 44 or more. So well done. We're making good decisions or just above average decisions. The highest global tally this week was 122 points. The man had captained Semenyo, but what was more impressive was his bench boost. That was what he used this week, the bench boost. On the bench, his keeper, Onana, with 11. First sub coming in, Garnacho, 9 points. Second bench player, Ait Nouri, 10 points. And then Doughty, 5. Just those 4 players was 35 points. Do you know the last person in our group got 16 points? 16. This guy got 35 from 4 players. He had Son in his team as well, and Palmer and Zabarani. As we all know, Son had 17 points, which by himself is more than the guy who got 16 with all his players playing. That's wild. Our top performing player was the manager, Peter Dennis. Manager of Peter Dennis 11. He got 76 points. He was one of the 15 people who captained Solanke. His biggest performers apart from Solanke were Son 17, Garnacho 9, and Palmer 13. Well done, Peter Dennis. That was a great haul. Number 2 was Mr. Mike Wow, who triple captained Solanke and got 24 points from him. His second best performer was Palmer, who got 13. Rice, who is super underrated, got 9. Zabarani got 8. And Pedro Porro got 7. Number 3 was Vic City, who got 69 points. Number 4 was Martin Osewe, Mato FC, who got 68 points. And number 5 was LED, who got 62 points. At the top of our table, Alexander Mutune is still at the top. He got 48 points, however, and that gave him a grand total of 1750 points. Number 2 got 69 points, Mr. Vic City, and that, with a 69-point haul, has reduced the gap. He has 1709 points. So that means he has narrowed the gap to 41 points. We have a tie for number 3. Why Are You Running used his bench boost, and that enabled him to get 56 points. And that raised his total to 1670, which is tied with Simnanijua, goodness gracious me, who got 44 points and has 1670. None of these top 4 people made any moves to get more Bournemouth or Luton players, but they all captained Solanke. Actually, in the top 10, 8 of the top 10 captained Solanke, and the other 2 captained Saka. Now, we have our top 2 in the 1700s. And before, when we had like a 3 racehorse, now it looks like a 2 racehorse, and then the others are fighting for number 3 or number 4. And by that I mean Leon and Leon are tied at number 3, and they seem to be far from number 2 and even further from number 1. Number 5 is now 27 points behind the 2 Leons. So, given this game week, we never know what could happen. It might be closer. And number 5 has opened nearly a 20-point gap between number 6 and number 7. And then from number 7 to number 8 and number 9 is also another 20 points. At the bottom of the table, Jeremiah Obiri is last, as we know. Actually, he was overtaken by Melvin Kathrima, the 2 people who don't change their teams. It's 12-22 to 12-23. It turns out Bruno Fernandes having a great week can really change things for you. Number 23 of 25 is Moses of Team Kubwa. He had promised us many 100-point game weeks, but that hasn't materialized. He has 1393. Ahead of him is Guns N' Moses, who has 14 points. He was the lowest. I think this is the lowest we've seen in our group in a long time. He had 16 points. And then just above him is number 21, who got 39 points, Kimeu Mutinda, who has 1452 points. So now, the section you've all been dreading. Game week 29. The actual void. We were preparing for the void. How have your preparations been coming along? Are you moving into Villa, Spurs, Brentford, Luton, Forest players? I have a free hit, so I'm just going to go heavily on Spurs. In fact, I have made my team already. Let me read it out to you. So I'm counting on Brentford to beat Burnley with a clean sheet. So I've got Flecken and Reguilon in my team as defenders. Then I have Romero against Fulham, Doughty against Nottingham Forest. My captain will be Son. Maddison's going to be in that midfield along with Barkley. Jared Bowen is in there as well, although I'm probably going to remove him for Paqueta. Then I've got Bailey. And then I've got Watkins and Ivan Toney as my strikers. On my bench, I have Martinez, Muniz, Robinson, and Toffolo. For those of you who don't have free hits, I'm really sorry. Now you understand its purpose. I hope you remember this next year, same time, because this will happen again. It happens every season. Kicking us off in the first of 4 games of Game Week 29 is Burnley versus Brentford. A very random fact. Godos scores against Burnley. Why? I don't know. But that's what he does. In their last 3 encounters, Brentford have beaten Burnley twice and lost once. Burnley haven't scored in 2 home matches, so I am hoping to use this for Brentford to keep a clean sheet. Burnley haven't kept a clean sheet in 11 matches, so there will be goals. However, having said that, Brentford haven't won a game in 5 matches, so surely this is a time, right? It's hard to know how you've constructed your teams, so I'm not sure what you'd be looking for from this fixture, or who you're willing to let go of. I have Ivan Toney as I believe he is a strong goal threat. He hasn't scored in the last 4, but 2 of those games were against Arsenal, Man City, and I think Liverpool, so it's not bad. Burnley should be easier for him to score against. I'm gambling with Flecken, but I know Reguilon has been good when he plays. He's going to be recovering from his hamstring, and so I'm going to be hoping for him to be back. On the Burnley side, you only really have Foster, Amdouni, Fofana. That's about it. Odober if you have to stretch, but yeah, that's it. Luton versus Nottingham Forest. When they last met in the Premier League, it was 2-2. Wood had 2 goals, Ogbene and Adebayo scored for Luton. Outside that, their previous matchups are in the Championship. And we're not going to use that history because those are different times and they have different rosters compared to that time. So it is clear that there will be goals in this fixture, 2-2. Luton score, we know that now. It's just a matter of who did you pick. If you have your Luton players from the last round, stick with them. Mainly because I'm sure you don't have too many players playing if you don't have a free hit. If you're looking to get into this fixture, maybe Barkley, Ogbene, Morris, Doughty would be good candidates from Luton. From Nottingham Forest, it's the same old suspects. Awoniyi, you have Elanga, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White. Wood scored 2 in the last game. Maybe they'll put him again. Maybe he'll score 2. Tottenham versus Fulham. I am banking on a clean sheet in this game. I have Son, Werner, and Romero. The last time they met, Son and Maddison scored. So those would be the 2 players I'd recommend you to have if you are looking to get into this game. In the last 5 games in the Premier League, Tottenham have won 2-0, 1-0, 2-1, 1-0, and then have drawn 1-1. So they've kept a clean sheet in 3 of the 5 games, and I'm really hoping for that clean sheet again. Fulham are not good in this fixture. If you have to get into this fixture, I would say Muniz, Willian, De Cordova-Reid, and Pereira, of course, because he tends to have assists. I wouldn't encourage you to have a Fulham defender. And then we move to our last game of the game week 29. West Ham versus Aston Villa. The thing that concerns me the most about this game is McGinn's red card. And what does that mean for Douglas Luiz? I was going to bring Douglas Luiz on because he had a great game the last time these guys met. In fact, he had 2 goals. Of course, Ollie Watkins will be in my team. In the last 5 games, Aston Villa have won 1, drawn 1, and lost 3. So historically, West Ham have had the better of Villa. However, since Unai Emery has taken over, West Ham's record hasn't been so great against Aston Villa. So take that into consideration. West Ham also are not in good form. However, Aston Villa just got trounced 4-0. I don't expect a clean sheet in this game, and if there is to be one, I see it happening in Villa's favour. But given just the recent form of these 2 teams, it may be either very interesting or quite dull. So, of course, if you're getting into Villa, you have Watkins, Bailey, and maybe that's about it right now. Of course, you could go Douglas Luiz, but that's about it. On the West Ham end, Luis Paqueta should be your first choice. Then maybe Jared Bowen, and then Kudus, and then Antonio. And that's about it. This is a unique game week. It's a unique game week because of the FA Cup happening this weekend as well, where they still have many Premier League teams participating in it. So at least once this round ends, we will not have such a blank game week again. But you know where there's a blank game week, or a void in this case, the double game weeks that will come up. So whatever you lose here, you may be able to gain later if you plan well enough and pick the right players. The next big thing to discuss is captain choices. Who will your captain be? The way I see it, you really have to trust your gut and decide what you think will happen. For example, if Brentford beat Burnley, who do you think will be the guy to do it? If you believe it's going to be Tony, then that should be your guy. Do you look at Luton and Forest and see a high scoring game? Can you predict who will score? You know there will be goals. It's just a matter of trying to decide a captain. I don't know how to choose from these two teams. When I look at Fulham Spurs, I can make a case for Son or Maddison even. When I look at West Ham versus Aston Villa, Watkins is an easy choice for captain. Paqueta as well for me. For others, Bowen, but he hasn't returned in 10 game weeks, or rather he has that hat-trick and then 9 blanks. You're probably even better off having James Ward-Prowse as your captain than Bowen. For me, I am going to be choosing between Watkins and Son. It will probably be Son, but I'll decide closer to the day. But if I'm feeling really, really wild, it might be Tony. Or I might just bring in Mope and make him my captain. But that move in particular would be Tavernier-like, and I'm not going to do that. So, apart from that, I hope your planning for the game week goes well. See you on the pitch. Bye.